Everyone, thank you so much for joining National NSSLHA's Office Hour Resume Workshop Edition. National NSSLHA's Office Hours is a live event series designed to bring students and professionals together to discuss relevant and important topics that are needed for current students. My name is Katie Kingsbury, and I serve as National NSSLHA's Vice President for Programming in Audiology. I'm a third-year audiology and PhD student at the University of Iowa, and before we get started, I'd also like to introduce my moderator for tonight, my executive council buddy and partner, Haley.
Thanks, Katie. My name's Haley Carrasco, and I serve as National NSSLHA's Vice President for Programming in Speech Language Pathology. I'm a first-year SLP student at the University at Buffalo. Katie and I will monitor any questions you ask throughout the night, which you can do through the Q&A box in the Zoom toolbar.
Perfect. Before we get started, we'd like to take a few minutes to thank our wonderful sponsor for tonight, AMN Healthcare, for their support of this event. I'd like to invite Miss Kristen Spruce from AMN to share a few words tonight.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this event. I'm very happy to be here representing AMN and just to be here with all of you. So I am an SLP, and I am alum from CU Boulder. So if there's any CU Boulder people out there, welcome. And I think this is just such a great topic. I think that probably everybody here in the panel will probably, share that you never know where your career is going to go. And especially as SLPs, I'm sure also in the audiology field, there are so many options for where we can go in our field. It's so broad, and I work in teletherapy. I'm senior director of teletherapy at AMN. This did not exist when I was sitting where you are in school. Was not even a thing. So I couldn't have even dreamed it up. And yet here I am, and it's exciting and I love it. And so it's important to always be thinking about how you're going to position yourself and how you are going to, put your best foot forward. How you're going to present that on a resume. And so in my job now, I get to look at resumes. I get to consider people who have come from all kinds of backgrounds. And I love that opportunity. I love to see where people have come from, SLPs, and it's not just SLPs. I get to consider and look at school psychologists and OTs and PTs and all related fields. And it's really incredible to see the different backgrounds they've come from, and sometimes very different backgrounds, and they've made a change in their careers, and they've switched from things that had nothing to do with being, an SLP. So it is important to think about how you position yourself and the language you use, and what you want to communicate about yourself. So this is a wonderful topic, and I'm just excited to be here with these other panelists. So I will stop talking now, and we'll get started with the panel.
Great. Thank you so much again, Kristen. At National NSSLHA, we understand that resumes can feel a little overwhelming, whether applying for grad school, a clinical fellowship, or an externship. Because of this, National NSSLHA wanted to offer a way for students to seek advice from professionals with firsthand experience with resumes in different settings. Tonight, we will hear from 5 CSD-related professionals with experience in reviewing resumes, as well as coaching students on how to write or tailor their resumes for specific situations. Although we've developed some questions for the panelists based on your registration submissions, this event is really meant to be an open discussion. So please ask those questions via the Q&A feature that can be found in your Zoom toolbar. So we really encourage you to keep questions out of the chat and really focus on the Q&A so panelists can answer them, and also so we can really stay on top of them tonight. We'll try our best to get through as many questions as possible, but if we're unable to get to your question, contact information for panelists will be shared on the last slide at the close of this event. We will provide some links and resources in the chat as the evening progresses, so keep an eye out for that. We're fortunate to have a panel of professionals who took time out of their very busy schedule to help us out tonight. And with that, I would like to introduce our panelists for the evening. Okay, so for our panelists, can you all briefly introduce yourself as your photo comes up on the slide, including your discipline, so either SLP or AUD, and your role, past or current work settings as well. So Dr. D, if you want to kick us off.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Doherty. I am an associate professor at California State University, Long Beach. I'm a speech language pathologist. I'm currently serving as National NSSLHA advisor, and I'm very excited to speak with you all this evening.
All right. Well, you already heard from me mostly, but I will just add that I have spent my career in the school setting. So I have been in really from birth, early intervention through transition age, but my focus has been in the school setting, both in person and now in the teletherapy space.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Dakota Sharp. I'm a clinical assistant professor at UNC Chapel Hill. I primarily work with pediatric cochlear implants at our Children's Cochlear Implant Center, and I primarily work with a lot of students, both in mentorship roles and as well as our externs who are on their way to graduation. I'm really excited to be here tonight.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Artis Weston. I'm currently serving as a consulting audiologist with MCL Consulting Group in Owings Mills, Maryland. I've worked in a variety of settings from private practice, ENT practice, hospital, university clinic. So I've got a bit of experience in a variety of different settings, working as an audiologist with both pediatric and adult patients, but my primary focus is adult services, including vestibular, hearing aid services, and diagnostic services.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Treasure Williams Wood. I am a speech language pathologist and private practice owner. I specialize in adult neurogenic disorders of communication, specifically neurodegenerative. So, primary progressive aphasia and dementia are my areas of research. I also serve as the research manager for an aphasia technology company.
Thank you all so much for sharing, and I hope that gave you a little insight onto the wonderful professionals we're going to be hearing from tonight. So before we begin, we're going to launch a quick poll to see where everyone is in their CSD journey. This will help our panelists focus on what tips to share, but if you have specific questions, either grad school, CF, externship, feel free to pop that in your question as well so we can really help answer those questions. So take a second, answer that Zoom poll. Awesome. So we see a majority of students are really applying for graduate school. So we hope these tips and tricks tonight will really help you on your graduate school journey, but also for those applying for CFs, externships, or jobs, we hope you can get some relevant tips as well, and we're more than happy to answer those questions. So we're grateful that you're here with us tonight, no matter where you are in your journey. And now we're going to begin our evening with a resume presentation from Dr. Doherty, and then we'll move on to some questions for the panel as well as some live Q&A from the audience. So Dr. D, thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Katie. I love giving this presentation because I really enjoy talking about resumes to students, particularly as you all are planning to apply for graduate school. And I know that application portals are open, and so it's really high up there on your list of things to do. So I like to include this so we can go over things that I have seen on the admissions side of graduate school applications, things that I would advise students not to do, and things that I would advise them to do as well. So I have made a sample resume here, and this is based off of a resume of a former student of mine who sent me her resume as she was applying, and I said, ooh, let's go over that and let's make some revisions. So anything here, just from the look of this resume, resume for graduate school, if you're applying for SLP or an AED program, that you would think to shift or change? You all can drop suggestions into the chat. Yes, the session is being recorded and will be posted on the National NSSLHA website. I will address that question. Remove the profile. Yes, it's a profile picture. Absolutely. So removing the profile picture, we see this a lot in applications, more than you think we would. We see a lot of Instagram selfie profile photos, and those do not belong in your resume. If anyone insists on having a picture, things that I see are like their headshot photo, but really we don't need a photo at all. That takes up space and it doesn't need to be there. Someone else mentioned the email. You would be surprised how many emails we see that are just not quite professional. I get that you are a Swiftie, but I don't need to know that in your resume. I'm a huge Beyonce fan, but I'm not putting Queen Bee #1 here on my email. I'm using my first name, last name, usually something that is, if not my school email, then just a generic email that has my first name and last name would be great. Someone mentioned removing the high school items, and yes, that is so important. I love that someone mentioned that, because so often we get resumes and people have done really incredible things in high school, and we know because that's what got you into college. And so we no longer need to see those high school related items, as impressive as they are. We want to talk about what you have done in your undergraduate career and not in your high school career. You all are mentioning all the good things. This is great. I love you all. Inconsistent fonts, just things that are kind of distracting and confusing when your eyes are glazed over and you've looked at, 24 resumes. You just don't want to look at one and things are confusing because of fonts and colors and spacing. I also saw someone said, highlight the second language. Amy, you are in it. So the second language, if you are a bilingual, multilingual applicant, I am going, if you don't remember anything else that I say from this talk, please put your language proficiency at the top of your resume. And the reason I say that is when someone is reading your resume, it is awesome if they can read the whole shape of the rest of your resume with the knowledge that you are bilingual or multilingual, particularly since our field is in desperate need of increasing multilingual, bilingual applicants. So put that at the top. That's super important. Someone says, Anisha, I see you, remove the proficient category, assumed all students know how to use Microsoft tools. Yes, I see that so often in resumes. They will say that proficient at Excel or Microsoft Word, or I had someone write Canva, and I was like, that's not, this is, I assume so. And if you're not, then you can learn, but it's not critical for your entrance into graduate school, into a graduate program. So definitely important. Some other folks talked about kind of stylistic things, the name being bolded or different colors. You just want to think of making it as consistent as possible. It makes it easier for the reader. Again, what you want to keep in mind is you are sharing this for those of you who are applying to graduate school, which according to the poll, the majority of you were in that space. You want to think about the person who is reading this, if this is resume number 50 that they have looked at for the day or for this week, you don't want to make it harder for them, right? You want to make it as easy as possible. So stylistically, you want to make the fonts easy to read. You want to make it go in a progression that makes sense in terms of time, right? So they're not jumping between what you did freshman year versus senior year versus your post-bac, right? So keeping it in a consistent style is certainly something that's helpful. I suggest really just avoiding color and keeping it in black and white, which also assists with some accessibility concerns possibly. So just making it very simple, and that is very helpful. I also see Ashley here mentioned about keeping the most relevant SLP experiences at the top. Absolutely. If you are applying to an SLP program or an audiology program, specifically, those experiences should be at the top, right? So you want to focus on those things that are most field related. And I think that's something that sometimes applicants can overlook, particularly when they've had a lot of different experiences. And so you really want to think about, if I am applying to an AUD program, do I want to highlight what should go first, my audiology related observations or my speech language pathology related observations? Obviously, you want to put the audiology ones up there. That's what they want to know more about, right? So just thinking about being strategic about how you highlight your items. Someone mentioned here, Lauren said, to put a LinkedIn link next to the email at the top. I think that's a great suggestion. That's a great thought. I will say, in recent years, I have started to encourage students to do that if they have something on their LinkedIn profile, right? If there's something that's there. I have, sometimes I'm looking at so many resumes that I just kind of start to go on like social media and like Google people. And so when you put something on your resume, if you want to guide me toward your professional page, instead of me finding the one that's less professional, that's certainly a way to go. I will also add that social media related things in general, I would set your page to private. I would set your personal socials to private. And I would encourage you to have a professional kind of social media presence, right? So, and I think that's so important. I say that to my current students here at CSULB now, and then, make that professional profile and use that to share things that are field related, right? So I'll have a student and they'll share, oh, I'm in a leadership role for NSSLHA, or I just joined the Hispanic caucus. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And so now that also helps to feed into someone's kind of psyche about knowing about how active you are in the field, right? And I also don't have to know that you were, at Coachella, right? I want to know about things that are field related. So that's super helpful. Someone also mentioned about GPA. Is that necessary if grad schools also receive your official transcript? So I go back and forth with this. My thought is, if you have a really impressive GPA, if you have, a 4.0 or 3.9, I wouldn't mind putting that on there. I think if you have a good GPA or it's okay, then it's sure, we're going to get your transcripts. There's no need for you to add that there. But if you have something that's super impressive, like a 4.0 or 3.9, then slide that in there, because even if I am also going to look at the package and I'll see the official transcript, I'm now reading the resume and saying, oh, this person has it's a really high GPA. What else do they have to offer, right? So it gives me another thing to kind of focus on and keep in my head as I'm reading, which is great. So these are some things that I think are helpful as you're thinking through your resumes and thinking through what to put there. I saw a question in the Q&A earlier about different sections of the resume, right? So certainly choosing section headers that draw your attention, that are appropriate, that describe what's coming. So one of the things I suggest to students is to include a title like related work experiences or related volunteer experiences, because maybe you did lots of different types of service, but it's not field related, right? And so in that way, to me, it allows a student to recognize that, yes, I also did a lot of Meals on Wheels, or I did a lot of other type of community service-based work, but my service that was field related is I went into local high schools and talked about being an SLP or AUD or a CSD major. And I talked about the field so I could expose it to, high school students who might not know about this career option. That's great, right? So you want to think through being able to make things that are related as opposed to unrelated. So agree. I see Guadalupe's thing about the restaurant experience. I worked at Origins in college, which is like a fancy lotion store. So I can, really tell you all about lotion and moisturizing and SPF and how important that is. But that shouldn't be on my resume for SLP, right? Even if I was a shift manager, that shows, I'm really, I was trustworthy in college. I had a key to the store. I was able to count the money. But I didn't put that on my resume. I did kind of loop that in when I was in interviews or when I was writing my personal statement, and I talked about how I was able to time manage and be a member of Phi Beta Kappa and have a very high GPA and also maintain a part-time employment where I was in a supervisory position. So you can still include those experiences in other ways, but I wouldn't necessarily include it on your resume. That's where you want to highlight the things that are field related. Should you also include dean's list or honors list? Absolutely, I would put that on there. I think that's awesome. For clinical placements, just because I did see that just a handful of you were here thinking about your resume for CF positions or externship roles, that's when I would think to gear your resume to the types of professional experiences you have had. I would think to include things like your experiences with certain assessments or certain populations or individual and or small group intervention. That's where I would list those things if you're thinking about your resume for your first kind of experience out of school. Okay, and I'm gonna go to the next slide if y'all can. So you all picked out a lot of these things already, which I thought was great. So definitely the profile photo, the email. I go back and forth with whether or not you need an objective because generally speaking, everyone's objective is to get accepted to graduate school, right? So it doesn't necessarily change. I'm not going to expect to read an objective that says, you want to work on Capitol Hill and I'm like, this is not the right place you applied. You applied to graduate school. So your objectives are generally going to be the same, but including your honors information, including your GPA, if it's, a point of pride for you, including your post-bac program. If you did your undergraduate degree in something else is great. I would remove the high school information just because it's just no longer relevant. And then the next slide. Thank you. We highlighted those items. The next one, please. Perfect. So the experiences, kind of looking at the alignment, someone made that comment earlier in the chat, but making sure that things are aligned well, right? The spacing just kind of visually draws your eye a little bit. The experiences that are SLP related, CSC related need to be toward the top. I love Nobu. You will catch me eating sashimi any day of the week, but I do not care to know that for your CSD related experiences. Same with if you are a fashion coordinator, that's lovely, but that is not CSD related. One of the things that I encourage students to do early, if you're not applying right now, is to think about gaining experiences that are field related. So I've had a lot of students who are active in their church and they'll ask about, can they put church related experiences there, particularly if they helped in the youth ministry. And I'll say something like, well, that's not exactly field related, but does your church have a special needs ministry? Do they have that? And that would be a way to tie in field related experiences to something that you're doing that also would be a great service to your church community. So that's a way to think through building field related experiences within what you're doing. So if you're doing one of these types of jobs, a lot of us, I worked at Lady Foot Locker, worked at other retail jobs. Is it somehow related, or could you do a facet of it that has to do with those with communication disorders? Did you create accessibility items in your place of business with AAC that allowed clients to have access to communication modalities, right? So you want to think about it in that way. The next slide, we talked about those two and the alignment. Yep. And then I touched on this a bit as well. So just taking off all of the high school things. I know it's hard because you were such a great high school student, but we really want to focus on your undergraduate career. And then thinking about really highlighting those things that are SLP related, moving those up on the resume if you're doing things that are SLP or audiology related specifically, taking off anything if it is not related to working with those with communication disorders, because it's not necessary that you have experiences working with children, but having experiences working with children with communication delays is what would be highlighted there. So thinking about how to frame your experiences. And the next slide. Thank you. And you all talked about this already, right? Taking off the proficient in. It still pains me that this student put her second language all the way down here at the bottom in this very, very tiny font. That needs to go all the way at the top because it is awesome. And we want to highlight that. That's incredible. The CPR, this certifications, also not that important because if it's necessary for clinic, we'll make sure that you get that. So you don't have to have that coming in. And then the activities there that are not SLP or CSD related. It doesn't matter to us if you can sing. It's great if you don't or if you do. But the idea about this best buddies, which I kind of want to know more about, I'm like, that sounds like it could be CSD related, but I don't have any description on what that is. So making sure that you're adding a description to explain some of those activities to people who might not know what they are. And then next slide. Great. And then I want to stop talking in a little bit. So I will take other questions throughout the chat as we go along. But I know the biggest thing that people have issues with is not including their high school related experiences when they were stellar. And I know it's painful, but just like wrap it in a bow. It's wonderful. It's what got you into college. And now we want to know what you're doing at the undergraduate level.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. D, for highlighting so many useful tips. Now let's take a deeper dive with our panel. To ensure we get through as many as possible, we've selected various pre-submitted questions for our panelists to discuss. You can add questions using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Be sure to read the questions that are already there and upvote your favorites.
While you guys think of some questions for our panel, we've had a lot of good time to interact with our Q&A feature already. We'd like to quickly do a little round robin for our panelists and ask, what are your top 2 must-haves on a resume and a top 2 never include? So I will start with Dr. Williams-Wood if you'd like to kick us off.
Sure. So I also have in the past been on admissions committees for graduate school admissions, and this is a topic that's really close to my heart because I was not a person that got into grad school easily. I love telling that story for people, even though I have a doctorate now and have been on the ASHA board of directors and have served on admissions committee. I actually applied to 9 graduate schools and got in on the 10th one. And it was really challenging. I did everything wrong. So for those of you who are feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous about this, I didn't get in, you will find your way. And even if it's not easy for you, everything will be okay. So 2 of my top 2 must-haves, I would say clear clinical hours documentation for graduate school applicants. Dr. D mentioned this, and she talked about how, a lot of times we're on these committees for reviewing your resumes, and we are looking at 50 resumes at a time. And so keeping it simple for me, I think someone said mine looks boring. I love boring because normally we have a criteria. We have a rubric, and when we're going through and looking at these resumes, I'm looking for, do you reflect the values of our program? Are you prepared for graduate study? What are you contributing that back? And I'm just going through and I'm looking to make sure that these things match. So the more simple and clear you can do these, the better it is for me. So showing me a dedicated section that I can see your observation and clinical hours broken down by setting or population is really helpful because it helps me support when you say in your personal statement, oh, I love working with children with Down syndrome, or I love working with children on the autism spectrum, or something like that, right? So really giving me a clear description of the type of clinical hours that you accrued during your previous study. Another one is having really clear evidence of growth and professional development, because I don't expect you to come into graduate school perfect. What we're trying to make sure is that you are ready to learn like a grad student. So that means that you are not the same person you were freshman year from senior year, because that'll let me know, okay, if they did this much growth in the past 4 years, then when they come here, they have a growth mindset. And so whether it's NSSLHA involvement or continuing education webinars you've attended or research projects that you've done or assisted with, any specialized trainings like Speak Out, I know has one for students, Prompt, AAC workshops, anything that shows that you're actively engaged in our field beyond the minimum requirements, right? This is a really tough profession where everyone is a superstar. And so everyone does the minimum, and everyone is great. Everyone has a wonderful story. And so we're really looking for active engagement. Show us where you went out and found experiences that you didn't have to get, right? Because we know everyone took these classes. This really signals intellectual curiosity and commitment to lifelong learning. Being an SLP is not just about getting the point, it's not about getting the A, it's about being committed to lifelong learning. So a lot of times I can see someone with a 4.0 that went to the top school and took all the classes and checked all the boxes, and that's okay. But then I see someone that went out and got all of these diverse rich experiences and grew, and I'm more invested in seeing what else they might do along the continuum of their education. And that's also something that employers value as well. In terms of two things that I would say never do, I think what's really difficult when you're on a graduate admissions committee is looking at generic duties without context or outcomes, right? So you want to avoid vague statements like, I was responsible for the therapy sessions or assisted with evals, right? Because those don't tell me anything meaningful about what you actually did and what you actually learned. Every student assists with evals, right? What populations did you assist with? What assessments did you do? Did you do literacy assessments? Did you do motor speech assessments? What did you take away from the experience, right? So using generic language suggests that you're just filling the space and you're checking those boxes, rather being really introspective about your clinical growth. Um, Another thing I would say is just kind of piggybacking off of the high schools is, there's like that middle, that outdated or irrelevant experiences that don't support your story, right? One thing that I will tell you that I would see over and over again is I babysat, I was a nanny. I babysat, I was a nanny. No context, right? There are people that said, I babysat for a child with that was neurodivergent and I supported this child's play, but and you're like, whoa, right? But people that are just saying, I babysat, I was just watching some kids and they didn't die. That doesn't really show me that, you're drawing that clear connection to your clinical skills like communication, patience, working with diverse populations, right? If you can't make a clear connections that babysitting job or your cashier position at Target is connecting to clinical skills, leave it off, right? As you gain more relevant clinical and academic experiences, your resume will evolve anyway, right? But every line on your resume should earn its place, right? We don't want to just beleaguer a resume to make it look packed. Make every line earn its place on there and make sure every line supports why you are ready for graduate school or clinical practice, right? If you're stretching to make the connection, if it's a reach, we feel that, right? And so, really push yourself to say, is this serving my argument that I am ready for graduate study?
So much, Dr. Williams Wood. We have so many great questions rolling in. So for our other panelists, I don't want to jip you, but we'll do one must have and one never include, if that's okay. So Dr. Weston, what's your one must have or that you want to see more often? And then your one, leave that on.
So they're kind of in the same vein in that if you have areas that maybe you're not proud of, or things on your resume or cover letter, any part of your package you that you think might not be as competitive, if it's a story of growth, I want you to emphasize that. Going back to what was said earlier about kind of showing your progression that you're not the same person. If you can spin those stories around, or I shouldn't say spin, you can tell the whole truth about those stories about how you learned from or grew from an experience. But then on the opposite end of that, if it's just I partied a lot freshman year, so I didn't have a high GPA, then don't you use the excuse that the GPA may not be necessary and just leave your GPA off.
How are we best displaying ourselves? I love that. Dr. Sharp, what are your one always have and one feel free to leave that off.
I always appreciate when students are really specific with either the tools or instruments they've worked with in audiology. A lot of the things we do are, I know you did that. I know you did audiometry and tympanometry. Those are just kind of the things we all have to learn to do. It's great that you had that experience, but I'd like to know, what equipment did you use? What hearing aid manufacturer have you worked with? What cochlear implant company do you have experience with? It not only tells me that you are paying attention to those things, right? Even at an undergraduate level where it might be more observation based. Um, but it also tells me specifically what you may have skills that you're bringing in, or what you might have areas that we'll need to work on once you're joining our team. So I think that's one thing I would definitely include. And then for what to not include, this has kind of been said like big picture, I guess, but like anything that's not true. Like I've had students where we asked about specific experiences and they obviously didn't know how to answer that question because I don't think it was based in reality. So if it isn't something where you could stand firm and explain how it's relevant to your clinical, relevant to your education and what you hope to do in your professional career, just don't put it on the resume. Um, we've talked a lot about not including those high school things, and I think if deleting those things, you look at your resume and you're like, there's some blank space here. I got some white space here. You know what you should probably do? Fill it in. Like, go to a supervisor, ask, what could I be doing? What opportunities are there? If you can't find them yourself, which we're gonna, I think, talk about some of those opportunities here tonight. But if you're having a hard time, go to a mentor, go to somebody and ask, what can I be doing to fill in these gaps with actual relevant experience that I don't have to fudge and make it sound like something that it's not, because then when someone in an interview asks me about it, I don't want to be, floundering.
I love that. So how are we really making sure our resume, as we're saying, displays our best self, but also a full picture of it? Because as you said, anything on there is fair game in that interview. How about you, Kristen? What are your top one and then one to not include?
Yeah, so I am not. I know a lot of you are students applying to grad school, but I will leave that expertise to everyone who is reviewing those grad school applications. But in general, I think just to pay attention to what you are, the job or what you are applying to. So often I will see resumes with statements. It feels like the person has not actually paid attention to the job description. So, I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at that application to that resume if it doesn't seem like they spent a lot of time attending to what we put out there as a job description. So that's important. That's attention to detail for me in the first place. So that's important. And I would say the never is, the resume is not the place to try to show really your personality or your sense of humor. You have a wonderful personality, I'm sure, and a great sense of humor. That's not what your resume is for. So it is for just your experience, your personality and your sense of humor. Maybe the interview is a place, but even then you have to be careful because you never know it may not translate well. So just be very black and white, very clear about your experience, and do not attempt to, either visually or through language, try to be funny or, do anything like that in your resume.
Thank you all so much. I think this was a great way to set us up for the evening and kind of frame a lot of our questions of, okay, what are we as students and early career professionals really wanting to put our best foot forward doing? So now we're going to shift to some of the questions we had from previous registration as well as from our live Q&A. So I am going to start out with a question back for Kristen. So I'm going to have you talk again. What are your thoughts on length? We're seeing some questions in our Q&A asking, should I keep it to one page? What are your thoughts on that regarding length? And maybe if other panelists after Kristen answers wants to speak to different settings.
For a professional resume, applying to a job, I would say one page front to back is okay, but I mean, really succinct, one page is best. Especially because often professional resumes may not even be reviewed by a human being initially. They are run, unfortunately, through, programs, and they are looking for keywords. And so, I'm not saying that is a wonderful thing. That is a frustration, but that is often a reality. And so being very succinct and to the point about, finding the most important language. So, I think graduate school applications are a very different thing. And so I think there's a distinction certainly in resumes for different purposes. But I do think that it's also, brevity is generally important, and really being cognizant of what is most essential to put on your resume in general. But certainly for job seekers, and especially later in the career, because you can always attach more detail. You can say, request for references, request for CV. You can provide more detail in the next step of the application.
Great, thank you so much. And then either Dr. D or Dr. Williams would you want to provide an answer from the perspective of grad school resumes and what your thoughts on and the length for those?
Sure. I would say, oh,
No, go right ahead.
I would just say, as long as it's necessary, right? Usually beyond 2 pages for us, especially getting into grad school, is not necessary, just by virtue of um, if you were doing 5 pages worth of things, I have concerns about your ability to prioritize your schoolwork. I'm a little worried about you may be doing too many things, or it signals to me that you may struggle with characterizing things succinctly and really getting to the meat of what you were doing. So I think that trying to figure out where you can streamline skills. So if you know that you want to convey strengths in your resume that reflect that you had a diverse array of experiences, that you really are passionate about bilingualism, and that you also have a lot of relevant work experience in a target population. If you've achieved that in section A of your resume, then you don't have to go back and really drill it in 10 more times, right? And so really try to make sure that if and I recommend doing this, make a list of what are the top 3 things that I want a graduate admissions panel to be able to say about me after they read my resume, right? Do I want them to be able to say, oh, you know what? That is Katie Kingsbury. She has all this amazing experience working with, people with aphasia because she volunteered here. She also is really, really active in her school governance committee, and she also is bilingual, right? Those are usually the 3 things that jump out. I don't need to read that 5 times across 5 pages to get that, right? So make sure that you're really doing that quality and not quantity.
I couldn't agree more. I think when I see a resume over 1 page, I'm already like thinking about it. This needs to be like really stellar. And most of the time, when it's over the 1 page, it's very flowery, and it is things that are not field related, things that are not necessarily as relevant. I'd rather you just trim all of that and show me what exactly you've done for this next chapter, right? So what are the things that are really important that you can highlight? I think when people have things on there and they've had, a lot of different retail positions, or they were doing a lot of things with their, athletics in their university. It's a lot of things that I could maybe say, maybe you could tell me about that in a different way, in a different form, as opposed to the resume, particularly because you're going over so many. And so you really do just want to see those things that are really field related and highlighted, and show things about what you want to do in this next juncture, whether it is SLP or audiology. And I will say, every once in a while, I do see a resume over 1 page, but it is that person had research, they were presenting at conferences, they were volunteering, they were in leadership in SAA or NSSLHA in their local chapter. Everything that was on it was a bullet point that was purposefully there and made some sense. And so when I do see that over one page, I'm like, wow, this is real. There's nothing I would even revise to take off here. I would also suggest for everyone applying, figure out who is your advocate and from a faculty standpoint, who can take a look at your resume and give you some honest feedback. And I would get that feedback from someone in CSD, not from your uncle who's really professional and does, something in tech, and not even necessarily from your university career services, because sometimes they make suggestions that aren't as relevant for our field. But I would ask, who are your recommenders? Like, ask someone, would you mind taking a look at my resume? Just because I think it's helpful to get that direct field level feedback. I also think it's great. It's something that I've done for everyone that I've written a letter of recommendation for, because if I'm sending out a letter of recommendation, I want to make sure that I'm like recommending a good applicant as a whole. So I want to make sure that they're presenting themselves in the right way. So definitely something to consider asking your faculty or those people who you are going to ask to write you a letter of recommendation. It could be the SLP that you work with or someone that you're observing with, but ask them to take a look and give you some feedback.
Great. Thank you so much. And kind of the last area we want to piggyback off this question, because we know we have a lot of different audiences tonight, whether grad school, CF, so maybe more professional resume, but we also have students here applying for externships from an audiology lens. So Dr. Sharp, I don't know if you wouldn't mind talking about what are your thoughts on length with a resume, and also maybe highlighting briefly some of the differences between a resume and CV and how students can curate those.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would definitely echo what everyone else has said so far, Dr. Williams Wood and Dr. Doherty there, with it's got to be rock star status to justify 2 pages when you're going from undergraduate to graduate school. It happens. I've definitely seen some where I'm like, this is full of very relevant experience, but a lot of times it feels like by the time you're halfway through the second page, it's a lot of fluff. I saw there was a question in the Q&A that was kind of asking about just kind of general skills, like good communication skills and good organizational skills. Some people might disagree that there's like relevance for that. I feel like many people kind of put those same things, unless it's a very specific to you distinguishing feature. Most people aren't going to get into this field unless they're pretty organized and good communicators. Communication is literally what we do, right? So I don't feel like that's maybe as relevant. I would say try to stick to 1 page as we're going from undergraduate to graduate school. I will say for those going from graduate school into externship, at that point, it would be a lot more common to see a 2 page resume for me personally, for the students that I've worked with, just because at that point you've racked up a lot of different clinical experiences in different locations. You have a lot of different supervisors. Maybe you have some research work at that point that you've been putting out. Hopefully you've attended at least one conference. You've done a lot more relevant volunteerism as a graduate student. So seeing a 2 page resume at that point is a little bit more common. At what point, I'm not really an expert on at what point it becomes a CV. I will say I didn't have a document that I considered a CV until I had graduated. When I was applying for my first job, I had a 2 page resume. I just didn't have the experience to justify what now my current CV is probably like, I don't know, 6 pages of things now that I've, racked up professionally over the years. So, I don't think for those in this talk having to worry about a CV, and again, somebody else can jump in here if you have a differing opinion there, because my first experience with writing one happened in my first job. But I think it's definitely expected and normal to go from graduate school to your next level up with something that's 2 pages. I think that's very appropriate.
Thank you so much. And I think also one last thing we want to hit on is really focus on what the application's asking for. If they're asking for a resume, don't provide them with a CV. If they're asking for 1 page, don't provide 2 pages. I think that's really what Kristen also hit on too, is really make sure we're reading the description, because a lot of times they might provide some guiding information in their description of what they're looking for. So thank you all so much. I think our next question would be for Dr. Williams Wood. You gave a really great answer for this in our Q&A, and we really want to bring it back up for you to chat a little bit about. A student is wondering, what experiences would you recommend grouping together on a resume? So they're kind of confused, maybe what headers you'd recommend using, and what are some possibly appropriate titles you like to see?
Yeah, so I think headers really help us, the people who are reading it, right? So the standard ones are education, clinical experience, and I'm looking at this as I'm typing and responding to people. Someone also just asked something similar about should they list their skills? Yes, listing the skills, and just avoiding kind of those tables or text boxes that can get confusing. Relevant, related experiences is always a good one, right? Because it's not necessarily professional experience. No one expects you to have this like litany of professional experience, but having experiences that are related. And then, under that too, you can put under related experience, you can include your volunteerism. Something that I was in the middle of answering that someone put that I think is relevant to this is they asked beyond certifications and stuff, and where do I list those or how do I get them? You have your clinical observation hours, you have your relevant coursework and your research experience, but anything that shows that you have spent the time building the rapport with the populations that you aim to work with is extremely valuable. Because again, there's like this balance, right? Where you can only get enough certifications that you can list in your certification section. And then after that, it becomes a little bit beleaguered of like, I got all these pieces of paper. Something that really sticks out to me when I'm looking at um, related experience or research is when I see people that volunteered at nursing homes that worked, oh, you're interested in the geriatric population, where you were a weekend volunteer with the activities coordinator at a nursing home, or you're interested in working in pediatrics outpatient. And so I see you substitute taught in a sped classroom, or I saw that you were a camp counselor at a camp for children with special needs, right? Those things make sense to me, right? Because it's not always about the certification. So as we talk about those headers, I don't want you to feel like, oh my God, I just have to go get all of these extra certs to list under there, because you can also go out and people, do peopling is really important, especially in this digital age. It's good to have the certs to list, but peopling is better because I can't tell you how many times as a director of clinical ed for a program, I have had students that had all the certs and all the stuff, but when we put them in front of children, they are like deer in headlights, or when they had to people with a person who is elderly, they really did not know what to do. So those things can really signal in your resume that you're prepared.
Great. Thank you so much. I think, Haley, we had a question from the audience, possibly about ordering. Do you want to field that one? And we can see which panelists might be interested in asking.
Yes, so the question was, how should a student present their resume? Should it be in a chronological order or should it be in some other order?
Dr. Weston, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this about maybe structure you're hoping to see, either for students or early professionals.
Yes, the two main types of resumes that I've come across are chronological and then functional. Chronological is far easier to read and kind of get the sense of who the applicant is and where they're doing. And it's what I would recommend for CSD students going into CSD fields. Functional resume kind of puts forth the skills and not necessarily um, following the employment or classes in the order that you took them. And that's good if you're changing fields and going into a different profession and you want to show that you have the skills to do this, even if you haven't taken the coursework or have work experience in that area. So I would recommend a chronological resume.
Great, thank you so much. So now we're going to shift a little. We've talked a lot about content already, but really kind of hone in on that content. What are we including and how are we specifically writing it? So this question I have is for Dr. D. Should descriptions and bullet points be written to really give a full idea of the picture? Or if we're thinking in that sense of brevity, what areas do you think are best to focus on within that bullet point about that activity?
think almost everything other than the education section of your resume should have like 2 bullet points to it. And it should be something that clearly describes what you did. You should have an active verb in there. Supervise, led, something that is very clear about what your role was in that position or at that location. I think that's super important. I also think it's important to think about how you're going to kind of stagger the sections in your resume, right? So you want to think about those things that are on the bottom. Should they be at the bottom, or is this something that you really want to highlight? Is it something that you had a leadership role and you were able to grow membership 30%, right? You want to include those things higher up, particularly if your bullet point descriptions are points of pride, right? So those are things that you want to consider, but I almost always suggest to have some kind of bullet point description after things on your resume, because you want to describe what it is that you did and what it is that you accomplished through that experience. So you want to look at what you're going to include and ask yourself, why am I putting this on my resume? Why is this important? And summarize that in 1 to 2 bullet points there so that you're able to describe that experience.
Great. Thank you so much. It's really a great guide of how are we really structuring those different points, because it is important to really highlight what those experiences really say about you. So next, I think we have some questions from the audience. So Haley, what are we seeing in our Q&A and from our pre-recorded questions?
So we're seeing a lot of questions on leadership experiences, specifically, how do you make leadership experiences stand out on your resume? Dr. William Wood, would you be able to answer this?
Yes. How do you make leadership experience stand out on your resume? I think that something that you should do with this particular trait is to reverse engineer and look at the program that you're applying to. Um, a trick is to always look at the mission statement of the academic program that you're applying to, because that's where you really get to see the heart of a program. Believe it or not, we tend to be a bunch of nerds in academia, spend way too long crafting these mission statements and vision statements. But that's one of the things that we're looking at when we're evaluating these resumes and these applications. Does this candidate speak to the mission, vision, and values of our program? And so when you look at their mission, vision, and value statement of a program, you'll get a flavor for what type of leadership experiences they value. Right. And so someone put that they were on a National Society of Student Leaders. If you're looking at a program and they're saying, so and so state university is looking to rate, to produce clinical leaders of tomorrow, or they're looking to produce thought leaders of the future, right? That kind of gives you an idea of what types of leadership experience might speak to their mission, vision, and value statement. So I would kind of reverse engineer when you're selecting what leadership to do and really make that clear, right? So look at the language that they use of what they want their students to do. And every good program is going to have a clear mission, vision, and value statement that this is what we want. This is how we want our students to impact the world. This is the kind of students that we want to grow. And so you want to say, okay, well, if they look like they really value diversity and having students that are strong advocates, oh, look at that. I was a leader in this advocacy group. I'm going to make sure I highlight that in my resume, right? So sometimes you'll have 20 different versions of a resume tailored to a graduate program because you're going to tweak those leadership experiences because you may not be able to include them all.
Just want to field this question then to Kristen, if you wouldn't mind asking. How do you think students, especially as we're transitioning from being a grad student, maybe having some of these leadership experiences, do you think it's relevant or the best way you would consider putting these on a more professional job focused resume?
They're absolutely relevant. Leadership is always relevant to any position you go into, even if you're not specifically applying to, a official leadership position. I think, employers are always looking for leadership traits. So I think that, we anybody hiring wants to look for somebody who is going to be, an advocate, especially if we're talking about, somebody in this who's a speech language pathologist. We're working in schools. We're working in a hospital setting. We need to be advocates for our patients, for our students. That's a type of leadership. How are you going to be a learner? How are you going to be seeking out, answers and making sure that you are, at the cutting edge of what research is and what we are doing in our field. So those are all types, that's leadership in our field. So I think anything that you have done where you are leading, you have been in graduate school, you have been shown those traits that show that you are a leader. You want to position yourself on your resume and show that you are initiative taking. That is always going to be a strength for you in any kind of position that you are seeking in your field. So yes, point that out and be sure to lean on that in your resume, and that will always be valuable as you are going into the workforce.
I just add, I talked about this earlier this month. I was in Colorado for their state association and talked to students about resumes. It's important for you to make a list before you even start your resume. Just make a list of all of your brag experiences, right? It's kind of awkward because, and I say this for myself too, because we have to do this on the academic side. You have to get really comfortable bragging, right? And sometimes the things that you should include on your resume, you don't include because you kind of assume, oh, it's just something I do, or it's not that big a deal, but it is a big deal. So one of the things I suggest to students is just to sit out with like a blank sheet of paper and write out all the like awesome things that you have done throughout your undergraduate career. You're thinking about applying to grad school. Did you, study abroad? Did you, volunteer somewhere? Did you do observation hours somewhere? Did you serve as a research assistant to a faculty member? Did you do your own research? Were you in the honors program? Did you, all of those things that you've done over the course of your career. And I would run that by like your, friend group or your, say, hey, is there anything else that you would put on here that you think I've done? Because sometimes other people are really able to brag about you better than you are. And so one of the things I encourage students to do is talk about yourself or write out that list as if it were like your grandmother or your parents. And, for me, it's like I go somewhere and, my mom's like, my daughter, you want to think about those types of things, right? What are all the things that they would brag on you about, right? So, and sometimes our families who are hyper excited about everything we do, kind of you're like, oh my gosh, seriously? But yes, that's what you need them to do. You have to be able to talk about all of those things that you've done, and you have to be able to just gather all of the facts, right? So that's super important to think through. And then thinking about if you are applying, in the future, maybe not this cycle, if you start to write that list out and it's really thin, what are some things you can do to start to fill that in, right? So, thinking about, can I volunteer somewhere? Can I go observe? I would say for me, I always think about volunteering as a bit more than observing because it, to me, it shows that you were doing something that was more hands-on. It can include observation, but you want to think about what is there something you can do that's more active, right? And most places are happy to let you do that. I would say I always encourage students to cold call private practices, right, in their area. Ask about if, say, I'm a CSD student, I just want to get some experience. Would it be okay if I came and shadowed you? They love those types of things. So that's great. And then being strategic on your resume as well. If you are, maybe you just started to work somewhere this semester and you're applying to schools right now, think about writing, fall 2025 instead of October to present, right? That looks a little bit more open, and structuring your time on your resume in that way by semesters instead of by month and year, right? So just kind of being intentional and strategic, but you have to start to write out these brag-worthy things, right? What are the things that your, family members would brag about? over dinner to their friends. You know, that's what you want to think about, and those are the things you want to frame and put on your resume.
Thank you so much, Dr. D. I think we've had some questions from the audience, Haley, if you want to field some of those.
Yes, so we have a question about conferences and research and how those should be presented on a student's resume. Dakota, would you be able to take on that question?
Sure, I think that would fit nicely under like an additional training or additional coursework section. And then I would be specific, especially if you had any kind of role. If I can't, I put this, I don't know if we're gonna have I put a section here on like how to stand out and start getting that experience. But if you're not familiar, your state organization is likely putting on some kind of annual conference every year. And they, as somebody who has done that year after year, they are desperate for student volunteers, even as an undergrad. So if you're looking for not only like including that as an additional training option that you attended a conference, but it's also a great volunteer opportunity to be very involved in the field. You would be networking and meeting other professionals that way. So this is just a little shout out for whatever your state or your closest organization is. It is never too early to start getting involved with those organizations. And then yeah, including that under like an additional coursework and training section, I think would probably be best.
Great. Thank you so much. I know a lot of students are like, how am I supposed to be including this? Where do we want to see that best? So I think now at this point in the evening, we're going to shift to you really brought us nicely into some career stage specific questions. We know we're spanning students at different points in their academic and professional career. So now we're going to try to shift and answer some questions geared a bit more at those different demographics. So either Kristen or Dr. Weston, if you'd like to take this question, students have been asking if you don't have direct CSD experience, what skills or keywords words should you include to highlight your potential?
If you don't have the experience, what skills or keywords, or what keywords would you use to highlight your experience? I would focus on, if you just don't have the the skills of the training, I would focus on kind of a growth mindset in terms of this is what I'd like to do, this is what I'd like to learn more about, especially
Mhm.
for those of you going from undergrad to graduate school. The expectation there is not that you are a clinician, it's that you have the potential to be a clinician. So that's something I would do if we're talking about we're at a point where we don't have the time to kind of jump into some volunteer sorts of things to get them on the resume. I would focus on these are the sorts of things that I would like to do, and this is how I envision helping this group, this demographic. This is a need that I've observed that I would like to address as a clinical professional.
Yeah, I agree. I think about, you know, anything that you do have in your background that maybe, suggests an interest or passion for, what you are applying for. So even if it's maybe not direct or obvious, even if, it's something that you've done that is related, try to highlight that, try to pull that out and, just show that it is an area. But yes, I agree that if you haven't had that direct experience, then that is what's available to you, is to show that this is what you are um, putting your energy and your time and passion into, is what's next for you, is what you are putting your energy and your drive toward, is next steps.
Great. Thank you so much. I think the next question we have, Dakota, you started to answer this a little bit, so I don't know if you have any more suggestions or if other panelists have other ideas, but students are curious, what would you recommend undergrads to start doing to stand out and gain experience on their resume? So you mentioned state association involvement. Are there other things you think undergraduate students can really do? And after Dakota, if other panelists want to share their ideas as well.
Yeah. So just to kick this off, I was a first generation college student, so I had no idea what I was doing when I got there. And I didn't know I was really going to be going into audiology until I was a year or so in. I was really fortunate. I was in an honors program that required me to do an honors thesis as an undergraduate. So I had to do research, but I didn't know as an undergrad I could have been doing it anyway, right? So maybe you knew that, maybe you didn't. And now you're a couple years into graduate school and you're like, is it too late? It's definitely not too late. And I would say that's one of the best things students can be doing. It's one of the things that really stands out to me when I look at a resume. Even you don't have to be the one publishing the paper, but participating in a lab is such a great way to be a part of what we do as clinical scientists, to really understand the scientific process. And keeping in mind, it doesn't have to be totally relevant. So when I was an undergrad, the start of my thesis was on stuttering, and I realized about a year into undergrad that I really wanted to do audiology, but I stuck it out because it was really interesting to me and I was learning a lot and I was able to, be a part of really great work that was happening. So no grad school held that against me, that my research experience wasn't totally in the world of audiology. There just weren't as many opportunities for that. So just being in that lab space is so valuable, and it's going to give you so many skills, and it's going to give you a mentorship with someone who's going to be able to write letters for you and provide feedback on your resume, and build those relationships and maybe give you a chance to go to a conference and see those kinds of things. So I would say it's definitely not too early and not too late to get involved with research as soon as you can.
Great. Thank you so much. To Dr. Williams Wood or Dr. Doherty, do you have any thoughts on what you're really wanting to see students get involved in to be that A+ kind of star applicant?
I thought Dr. Dakota's advice was great. Dr. Sharp's advice was great. I just think it was also the idea that you can be in an honors program, which is great. And if you can get in that program, do that. But if you can't, you can also still do research, right? It doesn't have to be if you can make it through a program of some kind, like an honors program at our institution, we have a program for first generation students specifically, that you'll often kind of try to gear students toward. But I've also had students who just say, I'm really kind of interested in something and want to look at this. Could I do that? I'm like, yeah. And I'm happy to, serve as an advisor or mentor in that way. And I don't think students realize that they can also submit proposals to conferences. Like it doesn't have to be a faculty member, right? You can do that as a student. And so I've had students who have just been interested in something and they submit a proposal, and they get to present a poster at a state conference or an ASHA. And so that is totally within your wheelhouse. So you could do that. And also thinking about not only posters, but also oral sessions too, right? Maybe you have a unique background. You have something that you think other attendees at a conference would love to know. I just did a session last year with a group of students who were all student parents. And I said, I think that's a really unique perspective. And I think other people would benefit from hearing y'all's experiences. And, they were like, oh, that, okay. And so, we ended up putting a proposal together, and it was great. Just kind of talking about what are some suggestions that you would offer for faculty or programs to support student parents. And so think about whatever your particular background is, whatever your experiences are. Is there something unique in that other people would benefit from hearing from? And so just thinking about, sure, if you're in a, directed program like an honors program, that's great. But if you're not, for whatever reason you can't do that, you can also submit to a conference to speak about what your experiences are, and people can attend and glean, great information from what you have to share.
I am thinking about this from a medical perspective because I'm a medical speech language pathologist, and the majority of my experience is in the hospital setting or skilled nursing facility setting. And I know this can be a really difficult industry for newer clinicians to break into. It's probably one of the biggest things that I get emails from people who are like, I'm coming out, I found your practice online. Can I come work with you? Or how can I get into the hospital? And I think that it can, it's really challenging right now for new clinicians to break into the medical setting. It's by no fault of your own. So I just kind of want to give that context when I give this advice. Our system, as you well know, in the medical space is broken. And then we have this really antiquated system of how we have been funneling medically trained speech language pathologists into hospital settings and medical settings. And so I don't want you to feel that if you don't get a medical CF right out of graduate school, you're a failure. You didn't do enough, because I have seen students that have checked every box, done everything, and because of where they are in the market, because of where they're located, because of the saturation. Like, I live in Chicago, so there are always these speech pathologists with 20 years of experience coming. So when students are coming out of university programs, they really just can't compete. There are always all of these different factors. So I will say that when you are interested in strengthening your resume to enter the medical setting, you may have to get really creative. So when we talk about preparing to go into the medical setting, we think of certifications, we think of conferences, but really in a hospital, we want to see that you can walk it like you talk it. We don't want to see that you did all of these CEUs and you did all of these things and then you get into the hospital and you pass out at the first sight of blood. So anything that shows me that you can people, right? That you can connect with a human being that may be going through the worst time in their life, which is people that are usually in a hospital, acute care, is going to strengthen my confidence in your skills. How do you do that? You can be a hospital volunteer. I think that's a very underrated thing that students don't do. They think, oh, I'll get like speak out certified and I'll get all these certifications. But being the person that pushes Miss Agnes from her appointments in the hospital once a month would actually show me that you're able to connect with a person, and that you're used to being in a hospital setting with alarms going off and emergencies happening, things like that really demonstrate. Even if you were doing, the lowest ranked task in a skilled nursing facility, whether it be volunteering or doing activities, actually to me speaks more than someone who just has a whole bunch of certifications and no actual experience. Now, granted, your time is limited in grad school, right? You're only one person. So if you don't get that, that's okay. But I really encourage you to be open to, if you do have to go to a pediatric experience that is in a school, people don't realize that you can still get a PRN job in a medical setting. And a lot of times when you are doing your CF, you already are getting enough hours and you're getting the right amount of mentorship for your clinical fellowship experience at your salaried or regular job. I say as soon as you are able, get a PRN job, work 1 week in a month at a skilled nursing facility. There are so many places that need skilled nursing facilities that need PRN folks. Do one Saturday, if you do one Saturday a month at, a skilled nursing facility, at a hospital, it take part-time work, because a lot of times those PRN medical jobs are more plentiful. And so you can get something on your resume. And so I've had a lot of students who were not able to break out for that 9 month CF, right? So they took that school position, and then as soon as they kind of got their legs under them, they got a position at a skilled nursing facility. And then look, now when I have my resume, they don't know how many hours you worked there. They know you started working there right out of grad school. That's what they know. I'm not gonna tell, right? They know that, okay, and then you started building rapport, right? You're starting to build rapport with the speech pathologist there. And then you are the first person that when that facility may need someone full time that they invite on, but you can also start getting your foot in the door in order to transition to a medical setting. And so please don't think that if you don't get a medical CF right when you get out, that you will not be able to be a medical speech pathologist. You just may have to finagle it a little bit.
Thank you so much. I really love how you're giving such specific advice. I know our students are loving it in the chat. So we're going to shift to our final section of the night, which is kind of like a catch-all. So any remaining questions we have for this evening, feel free to drop them in the Q&A, and also be mindful of how many of these maybe have we answered through other questions, or as well as our kind of walk-through presentation in the beginning. So feel free to start adding those. The first question we want to kick off with is for Dr. Weston. So students are wondering, Okay, do we really need separate resumes for different positions? And kind of along that, do you have any strategies on how students and early professionals can best tailor their resumes?
I would say yes, you do. I would not encourage anyone to just write a resume and send it out to every job that they want. This is a planning process, and you should view writing your resume as a process, and that you're tweaking and kind of working on it. But ultimately, I like this idea of kind of creating a database of information that brags on you and pulling from that database specific information that addresses the needs and wants of the employer or school or internship that you're applying to. One strategy I would suggest is take their verbiage and and apply that to your resume. So if 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 I'm putting audiologic evaluations on my resume, but in their posting, they're saying they want someone who has experience doing hearing testing. It's the same thing, but I'm going to change my wording to say hearing testing because again, I don't know if an ATS is going to be the gatekeeper for resumes, and an ATS doesn't know that those are the same thing. So I usually encourage folks to use the verbiage that is given to them, and I would also say emphasize the order in the same sequence that they use on if we're talking about jobs, or if you're talking about grad school, use a similar order. So if they're really interested in, say, hearing aids, sorry, all of my examples are going to be audiology. If they're talking about they want someone with skills in hearing aids and diagnostic testing and vestibular, organize your experiences in that order as well.
Thank you so much. That was such a helpful walkthrough and honestly a great hack of how are we using that resource? They've posted that job already. How can we as the applicant and student kind of use that to our advantage? I think the next question we have is kind of related to non-traditional students or maybe students that are returning to grad school and the CSD profession after another career. So the next question we have is, as a non-traditional student, how do you think they can best incorporate those past career or career changes into their resume? So do any of our panelists want to speak on this?
I love a non-traditional student. They just, I just love them. So I think, and I've had them from a couple of different standpoints. I, to the point that was made earlier, it doesn't have to be, that you are volunteering for 40 hours a week. That's a job, right? I had a student who was working a full-time job and was pretty sure that she wanted to do a career shift. And so she volunteered with me one evening a week for like, I don't know, a year. So as she was just kind of thinking about the field, she was just getting experience observing. And so she observed and then she became a volunteer. And I was later able to write her a really strong letter of recommendation. So I think for non-traditional students, you do want to think about having an opportunity to volunteer or observe it. It might just be like I had a student one day a week for an hour. I had another student before who would volunteer one Saturday a month, but for a longer period of time. So it didn't have to be so lengthy, right? But the experience that is field related because they had jobs in marketing or in tech, and that's so unrelated to what we do, but just having those kind of touch points of doing something that is related. I'm less inclined to then look at things that are like, was the student engaged in research, right? Because they were in a different field. But I am looking at what they did to kind of get engaged in the field once they wanted to make a pivot. I also have looked before at students who got into the field because of their own experiences. They had a family member, and then that's how they got introduced to our field, or something along those lines. And so then I look at, did they take that opportunity to then volunteer or observe in that clinic or get to know the field in that way? And I always encourage non-traditional students to speak about that pathway in their personal statement. So talk about how you worked in a different field and then you found this passion known as CSD, and this is why. I think it really helps you stand out. I think it's very unique. And I think they bring such a different perspective to the classroom and to the clinic. So I always love that non-traditional background.
Dr. Weston, did you have anything you wanted to add? Okay, good. Perfect. No, we're absolutely good. I was like,
Could I add
Dr.
one
Sharp,
quick thing?
absolutely.
I think, yeah, that was a perfect answer. And there's been some questions about cover letters and personal statements in the chat. And I know we're kind of keeping this resume focus. I just want to say one quick thing, like big picture about resumes. This feels very like clinical, right? We're like, all right, you got to pare this down. You want to use this. It's like it gets I don't know, robotic in a way sometimes, but hopefully you're seeing that what we're trying to help you do is just paint a one-page picture of your story. I mean, everybody has such a unique and important story. It's what they bring into their career. It's what makes you unique. So just first of all, I hope you're hearing this. Like the experiences you've had, they are important and they're special. And I wish there was a way that they could always help separate you on your resume. We're trying to give you the most, competitive advice possible because it's a really competitive field. But I do think that your cover letter, your personal statement, whatever that looks like for the places you're applying, one of the questions, I think the name was Ellie. Ellie was asking good questions in there. And I think that that is definitely the place for that story to shine through. So definitely, I can't underscore enough that these two things, your resume and your cover letter, they really need to be complementary to one another. And to the points other people have made about, making a resume that's tailored to these different positions, I completely agree with that. I think, if it is a competition, it is. If we let's take it down a notch, let's say like it's a sport, it's a game, right? It's fun. I did job interview resume competitions in high school, and so I part of me like does take it as like a competition a little bit. But if we're taking it, more from that lens, then what do you need to do to tailor your submission to this place? Because I'll tell you, as somebody who reads resumes and cover letters, the number one thing that makes me not interested in a candidate is when I read through that cover letter or look at their resume and it doesn't seem like they took 1 minute to acknowledge who they're applying to. If it's emphasizing experiences that now there was another question that asked, I'm an ambassador for my school. Is that relevant? For the resume to that school? Maybe a lot, right? The school I went to, that ambassador program was really prestigious, and that showed you had a lot of school pride. But to the rival school you might be applying to, do you think they care as much? Maybe not. Maybe we don't emphasize that leadership experience, right? So when we say making, it doesn't mean you need to have drastically different resumes or drastically different cover letters, but the time you take to each of these, it does shine through. As somebody who reads these, I promise you, making it, focused on the place that you're applying to, it really does count for something. So just kind of encapsulating those two things together. I don't know if you're going to do it in office hours on cover letters, but I think that's also a really important facet of this. And maybe some point in the future, that'd be a great topic to have.
I was going to say,
I'm
Dr.
with
Sharp,
you.
you're setting us up so well. We have our CF and externship event. We just had our grad school event. So if you missed those events, feel free to check out our YouTube channel where they're recorded and stay tuned for our upcoming events. So the last question we have time for, I know we have had such a great evening, is for the entire panel, what is one thing you wish you included on your resume when you were applying to either grad school, a CF, or an externship? Feel free to specify which of those three areas you want to, or a job. So which of those you'd like to speak to. So Kristen, do you have something to start us off that you're like, I wish I had included this on my first job application, my first grad school application?
That was so long ago. Um, I mean, I think that just the specific, just kind of what would the advice we're giving is just really knowing the audience, just being very including something that just shows that I really knew exactly what I was applying to and making sure that that came shining through.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Dr. Sharp, kind of to wrap us up. Your one thing you're like, really wish I put this.
So I know a lot of you are young, have lots of experience in social media, it's in Canva and things like that, and that might not always be the most relevant thing, but I managed social media for multiple things in undergrad, and then when I came into jobs and I told them about that experience, they were so excited about it, and I didn't think like, oh, I could have been putting that on my resume, that I managed an account with this many followers, things like that. Again, it's you gotta think about your audience here. Not everybody's going to care about that, but some jobs, like if you can tell they have, like UNC has a really strong research communication presence on social media. They do a great job. Boys Town the Boys Town APC lab does a great job communicating research findings. If you have a background in graphic design, things like that, I mean, as much as that's not clinically relevant, it is job relevant. They might be looking for people who can kind of take on that kind of a role. So that's something I wish I had included on mine.
Dr. Weston, how about you?
I would have included my personal experiences with hearing loss. Growing up as a child with hearing loss, I kept that off of my resume because I thought that was going to be a weakness without realizing that many of my patients now really relate to that fact. So anything unique about yourself, maybe look at it again if you think, well, traditionally it hasn't been viewed as something that's a strength, it could potentially be a strength for you.
Dr. Williams Wood, how about you?
I think I would have highlighted my entrepreneurial skills or my business acumen. I've always had some kind of hustle, side hustle business, my foot in something. And um, here's the thing, even if you're not starting a business, these skills matter. Schools need SLPs who can advocate for their programs and manage their caseloads efficiently. Hospitals need clinicians who understand productivity and who can collaborate across departments. So being business savvy really makes you a better clinician. And our field is evolving so rapidly that highlighting those things shows that you can think outside the traditional medical education silos.
Thank you all so much for sharing. Dr. D, you shared so much wonderful wisdom tonight, and I'm looking at the clock, and we are almost out of time. So it has been such a wonderful evening and a discussion on how we're really setting students and professionals up for success. In a moment, we'll share how you can contact all of our panelists. As you sign up tonight, you'll receive a post-event survey. Please take a moment to fill that out so we can continue to bring you events that are relevant and best serve your needs. So we're putting that link to the survey in the chat as well. Our next virtual office hours will be November 5th, and we'll focus on the praxis exam. So all of my grad students, get excited. Start thinking about your questions, and we'll send more information out soon. We also want to encourage you, for those who are going to be in Washington, D.C. at the National Convention, to attend National NSSLHA events from November 20th to 22nd, and be sure to visit our National NSSLHA Lounge. We sometimes have cookies or other snacks, so stay tuned for that. If you're attending convention, also feel free to sign up for the Knowledge Quest. Use the QR code on the slide to get more information and sign up. There will be prizes, and this is a fun event. The National NSSLHA Graduate to Undergraduate Scholarship closes December 31st, and we'd love for you to share with your chapter members about our scholarship. It's open to National NSSLHA members who are undergraduates, sophomores, or juniors, and we have more information on our website on how to apply.
We want to remind you of the benefits gained when you join National NSSLHA. Members are eligible for cash awards, giveaways, and scholarships, and you can apply for national level student leadership opportunities. You also get general access as well as discounted convention registration. Grad students can receive the conversion discount when they are members for their last 2 years of graduate school. More information can be found at the link in the chat. If you're interested in National NSSLHA membership but are facing challenges with obtaining it, consider applying for our membership scholarship. Thanks to donations, we're able to provide students with free memberships. Last year, we gave away nearly 70 membership scholarships. The application is open now at the bottom of our membership page.
On behalf of National NSSLHA, we'd like to thank our wonderful panelists for offering their time and expertise. Here is contact information that they've provided for the best way to be in touch with them. Feel free to screenshot this info, but we'd ask that you only contact them via the means they've listed here. As we know, they have busy careers, busy lives, and they have a lot of things to manage. We'd also like to thank our wonderful sponsor, AMN Healthcare, for supporting this great event. This has truly been a wonderful discussion, and it's only with the help of our dedicated members and our CSD community that we are able to continue to thrive. This conversation has been recorded and will be posted on National NSSLHA's social media accounts. Have a great night, and thank you all.